Okay, well, folks continue to join us. I'll just go ahead and get started, and they'll join us as they come. So good evening, everyone. We are so happy that you could join us for this evening's event, Unwrapping Sustainable Period Product Use in the Caribbean. My name is Aaliyah, and I'm the co-founder of CCMRH alongside Kalita, who you will hear from shortly. Just to give you a little bit of background about CCMRH, so we started as an idea when Kalita and I were in grad school, and now we've grown into a regional network of organizations across the Caribbean that provide maternal and reproductive health supports across the region. And to date, we have 14 member organizations across 7 different countries. And through our membership, we work to provide a space for members to be able to network, work together, and grow together in our united aim to support, provide, or advocate around maternal and reproductive health in the Caribbean. And if this sounds of interest to you and your organization, we're always looking for new memberships. So please feel free to send us a private message here or via email if you would be interested in joining us. So in addition to our membership, another very key component of CCMRH and our mission is to conduct research on gaps and experiences more generally, or just topics related to maternal and reproductive health. When Kalita and I were in grad school, as I mentioned, we were really interested in studying disparities and understanding trends in the Caribbean, but realized that there were not many resources provided at our school on this topic. So we wanted to address that. And post-grad school, as we began making connections that we've been so lucky to make through CCMRH, we've seen the amazing work and research being conducted by community-based organizations across the region, some of which are joining us tonight in this topic area. And through our membership, we've now been able to contribute to this research through our current analysis, which brings us to today's topic, which is understanding trends in sustainable period product use. So welcome once again. And now that you know a bit about CCMRH and Kalita and I, we'd love to know a little bit more about you. So we'll take a moment and please feel free to share your name and where you're from in the chat as we keep going, just so if you're comfortable, just so we all know who's in the room. And then I'll get back to sharing a little bit more about this project. So in early 2023, CCMRH and Sustainabelle TT conducted a preliminary analysis of sustainable and organic period product use in the Caribbean. We received 100 individual survey responses, and we conducted 12 interviews with individuals from across the region pertaining to their use of and access to sustainable and organic products. Tonight's event seeks to share findings from this project in hopes that we can work together in partnership to address some of the gaps that were realized through this research and to ensure that sustainable period products are more available across the region specifically. CCMRH and Sustainabelle are committed to this work, and we know that many of you here are as well. So we're very excited that you're here, and we look forward to developing next steps together as we move forward. Following this event, we're also excited to be sharing a report summarizing our findings, so you can keep an eye out for that as well. I'm going to pass it over to Chantal in a moment, but just before I do, we do have a few quick housekeeping notes to share. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be shared on our website and our social media following this event. So while the audience members will not be shown, if you do hop off mute to ask a question, that's going to be available in the recording. And so if you feel more comfortable, you can feel free to type your message in the chat or message one of us directly, and we'd be happy to make sure that your question is answered. During the Q&A, you can submit questions using the chat function at the bottom of your screen, or you can submit to any of the team members, which is Chelsea, Chantal, Kalita, or myself, directly, and we'll make sure that the question is answered live for you. Also, we do ask that you remain on mute during the panelist discussion and presentation, and if you have any questions or comments at any point, please feel free to type it in the chat, and we'll make sure that it's answered during the Q&A. Finally, we do want to reiterate that this study was a preliminary analysis. So while we gained very, very useful insights on trends in sustainable period product use across the region, this is definitely just the beginning of our work in this space. And we would like to conduct future work in this topic on a larger scale. And we hope that we may be able to do that in partnership with some of you as well. So now that all of that is taken care of, we're very excited to get started. And we're going to start by sharing the process, methods, and qualitative and quantitative findings from our analysis before we jump into the Q&A. And following the Q&A, we're going to take a moment to share thoughts and discuss together next steps in this work before we wrap up. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chantal to get us started. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Chantal and I'm the founder of Sustainabelle. Sustainabelle was created in 2021 with the aim of educating, guiding, and motivating menstruators in Trinidad and Tobago to adopt more sustainable menstrual hygiene practices. So what exactly is the difference between sustainable and organic products? Well, firstly, sustainable menstruation on the whole refers to the use of period products that don't harm your body or the environment. So a sustainable period product has environmental, social, and economic benefits while not using too many resources or not significantly contributing to pollution. Sustainable period products generally use less energy in production and manufacturing. So when you talk about organic period products, so organic usually speaks to the materials used in making the period products. So organic period products, they're generally free from synthetic chemicals that are harmful to the body and the environment. They're usually made from plant-based materials. So there's organic cotton, bamboo, or even sugarcane fiber I heard of recently. And 100% organic period products, they wouldn't contain any type of plastic or synthetic materials. And they're easily biodegradable. And they're also free from pesticides, fertilizers, fragrances, and dyes. So organic period products are technically sustainable as well. So it's not really a distinction. It's only organic just generally speaks to the material, but they are sustainable period products and they could either be reusable products or disposable products. So why is all of this important, you may ask? Well, the normal period products that we use usually takes about 800 or 1000 years to decompose. And when you consider that the average menstruator would have about 400 periods in their lifetime, using about 5,000 to anywhere up to 15,000 synthetic pads and tampons, that's a lot of waste being created in the environment. So adopting a sustainable menstrual hygiene practices is not only good for your body, but it also saves the environment as well. So I'm now going to pass it on over to Kalida, and she'll jump into our study purpose, as well as the demographics of the survey and interview participants.
Hi, all. So I'm Kalita, the other co-founder of CCMRH, alongside Aaliyah. I'm happy to be here today and have you all here with us. So starting off with the methods, to give a brief introduction to the study, the purpose of this study was to conduct a preliminary analysis of survey responses and interviews to understand sustainable and organic period product use, and including the patterns in use, the barriers, and incentives to use among Caribbean menstruators. So the study was conducted between February and April this year. The survey was open between February to March, and between March and April, we conducted interviews with those interested. We then analyzed the data, and our survey was shared online and through our social media pages and networks, and then promoted as a survey on sustainable period product use in the Caribbean. And so we had 100 participants, and 6 of these participants were excluded due to our exclusion criteria. And this included individuals who indicated that they had not used period products or purchased period products in the past year, and then also individuals who did not live in the Caribbean. So in the survey, as I said, we asked participants if they were interested in being interviewed on this topic, and 49 people originally expressed interest, and we ended up conducting 12 interviews with a diverse range of countries for those who did use and did not use organic, sustainable or organic period products. And you can see this, the survey participation by the numbers here. For the demographics of our survey, we attempted to get a response from a wide range of countries. However, as you can see that it's definitely skewed towards Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica due to probably us having a high following of people in those countries. And so keeping in mind that our study was for people who purchase period products for themselves or for others, so we could have a wide range of participants. You can see that, our participants were mostly women, 96.8%, with a small number of non-binary participants. The other percentage are those who wish to not respond to that question. And then looking at whether or not people purchase period products for themselves or for others or for both. Most people purchase products for themselves, but there were also a lot of people who also purchased period products for others and themselves. So we got a good number of range of those participants as well. Here you can see the age range of participants. A lot of our population was between 25 and 34, but also ranging between 18 and 64 as well. And then for the interviews, we had 12 interviews from many countries. So as I said, our aim was to at least have at least 2 people from each country, one who did use and then did not use. However, there was definitely a challenge due to participant follow-up and logistics. But this is our spread of, so we got a range, mostly there were 3 in Trinidad and Tobago, but we did try to receive participants from across the Caribbean as well. So now I will turn it over to Aaliyah to explain what we found in our survey results.
Thanks, Kalita. Yeah, so our survey provided us with some really, really useful insights into trends in sustainable period product use across the region. So if we go to the next slide, to begin, participants were asked whether or not they use a sustainable period products just as a baseline. And as Kalita mentioned, this was one kind of one of the more important questions in our interview. And in total, a majority of participants indicated that they did not use sustainable period products. So that was about 61.7% or 58 people. The remainder, 36 people or 38.3%, indicated that they did use these products. So moving into use across the region, we found that a large majority of participants used non-organic pads or liners for their periods. And this was followed by organic pads and liners, but even still, there was a large gap here. As you can see, about 83% of participants indicated that they used non-organic pads or liners, and 23% indicated that they used the organic options for these same products. Menstrual cups also had some fair usage in this study. And the least used product that we saw were organic tampons and menstrual discs. So once we had some insight into whether or not people were using sustainable period products to manage their periods, as well as the products that they generally used, we asked folks why they did or did not use these products based on whether or not they indicated use. So some folks were kind of segmented off based on their response to the previous answer. So if we start with why people did not use sustainable products, we found that generally these products were hard to find in participants' countries or communities. And of the 58 participants who didn't use these products, about 56.9% kind of indicated that as a barrier to their use. And then another large barrier was cost of sustainable products. So this kind of came up often, not just in our quantitative data, but also in our qualitative analysis, which we're going to talk about shortly. But in that case, about 39.7% of people found that these products were just too costly, and that's why they didn't use them. Pivoting now over to the reasons that people did use sustainable products, we found that an overwhelming preference for these products was due to them being environmentally friendly. And here you can see that about 72.2% of people that did use these products indicated that, or sorry, I'm sorry, 75% used them because they're environmentally friendly. Similarly, about 72% of people use them because they felt like they were better for their body. Some other reasons were also cited. Another big one was cost effectiveness, and we'll kind of get into this nuance because, of course, we just mentioned those that don't use these products mentioned that they were too costly, and those that do mention that they were cost effective, and we're able to kind of get into the weeds of this trend in the qualitative data analysis. If we move on to the next slide, we then asked people where they found products locally. We already knew that a lot of people were not finding them. They found that they weren't easy to find in their country or community. But when we asked people this, a whole bunch of organizations and locations came up. So supermarkets were a big one, but then also some big brand names came up as well. So Lily Pads, Women's Touch, Honey Pot. These were brands where people were purchasing these products. And a lot of folks mentioned that they ultimately had to order these products from the US. So that's a little bit about the survey findings. And I will just take a moment here before I pass to Chelsea to say that if you do know of other places or brands to purchase sustainable period products, please feel free to pop them in the chat now, because we'd love to expand the resources that we can share with others about where they're available. Thank you. And I'll pass over to Chelsea now.
Thank you, Leah. So hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. I'm an advisory council member for CCMRH. And I'm just like super passionate all around about health equity, particularly in Caribbean populations. And so I believe that sustainability across the board, as it relates to menstruation and femme hygiene, is a critical component of that, and will definitely help eradicate period poverty in the Caribbean. And so I'm very excited to share the qualitative insights from our interviews as it relates to some of the reasons people were opting into using sustainable products, as well as the challenges they're currently facing. So there were three main reasons or interviewees identified for sustainable product use. The first one was that they're more eco-friendly and they have a reduced harm on the environment as compared to traditional period products. The second reason was just that they have a better impact on the body, or in other words, made feminine hygiene a more comfortable practice. And the third reason was that there was a huge financial benefit of having reduced expenditure on menstrual products over time. So as it relates to the environment, one participant from Grenada shared that they go to the supermarket and they see all the brands and they smell nice, and then they started thinking that it's all going to go to the landfill. Another participant from Antigua and Barbuda shared that sustainable period products were gentler on her body, stating that she used to be irritated a lot with the other non-organic disposable pads and never realized that it was actually an allergic reaction. And then when she started to use the cloth pads, that irritation like decreased over time. And then another participant from Trinidad and Tobago expressed that while sustainable period products can be expensive depending on the type of cloth pad that you buy, it's an investment. And studies suggest that over time, women report saving as much as 90% on period expenses annually by using sustainable alternatives. While there were clear benefits expressed in using sustainable period products, or interviewees did share that there were some challenges that they faced switching to sustainable period products or using them, particularly accessibility and the learning curve that was there. So some participants suggested that it can be difficult to learn to use sustainable period products, particularly menstrual cups, with one participant from Grenada stating that while it is difficult at first, the payoff is worth it. She reported that after a few tries or months of practice, you finally just get around to it and it becomes the norm, and that's why she sticks to it. And then another participant from TNT shared that accessibility is their greatest challenge, stating that sometimes it's really hard to find products, and then the range of products can be diminished in certain stores, which makes it even more difficult. So from our preliminary analysis, we found generally that the array of benefits using sustainable period products tend to outweigh the challenges. I'll now pass it over to Chantal.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. So Chelsea would have looked at interviews who said they did use sustainable period products, and I'll be looking at the ones who did not use sustainable period products. So we identified 4 recurring themes. So that was the lack of knowledge about sustainable period products, financial costs, discomfort in use, and accessibility. So in terms of the lack of knowledge of period products, some participants never really heard much about sustainable period products to begin with. And if they heard about them, they didn't really know where in their country they could find the products or even how to use sustainable period products. Additionally, we found that interviewees who had health conditions like fibroids, they were hesitant to use sustainable period products because they didn't really know how it could affect their body. In terms of financial costs, several interviewees indicated that although they were interested in switching to sustainable period products, they were concerned about the upfront cost of these products. And on to the next slide. So some participants they felt that they were uncomfortable using unclean reusable period products in particular. For instance, the idea of having to navigate a menstrual cup for one participant seemed very uncomfortable. Additionally, other participants felt they just didn't really want to have to deal with their blood when using like a menstrual cup or a cloth pad. In terms of accessibility, many participants felt that sustainable period products were not widely available in their country. And this lack of accessibility was a barrier for them not switching to period products that were sustainable. Additionally, some interviewees mentioned the lack of adequate access to water and sanitation hygiene, which is important to support menstrual hygiene management overall, but specifically when you're using reusable products. For instance, some toilets in businesses in countries in the Caribbean don't have access to running water, which would make it difficult to clean reusable period products. And for both users and non-users of sustainable period products, accessibility and cost were common recurring themes. And if you go on to the next slide, there were other themes identified during the interview stage with regards to improving knowledge, accessibility, and availability of sustainable period products. So lots of interviewees felt that we need to normalize conversation on periods overall. And by talking about periods and making sure that it's not a taboo topic, people feel more comfortable discussing periods and their different period product options. Spreading awareness was also highlighted as important. Participants believe that having targeted social media campaigns in the Caribbean could be an avenue to spread the knowledge and awareness about the benefits of sustainable period products. And if you talk about the negative environmental impacts of traditional synthetic period products, this could encourage people in the Caribbean to transition towards more sustainable products. Some participants also mentioned subsidizing period products in the Caribbean, and just feel like the government should have some sort of subsidies to make these products, particularly sustainable period products, more widely available. So this brings us to the end of most of our findings, and we'll now begin a question and answer segment of the webinar. And I'll hand it over to Aliyah, I believe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chantal. So yeah, those are our findings. We wanted to open it up first to see if anyone had any questions before we move into next steps, and we'd love to discuss that as a group. Jessica, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead.
Hi, everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you for this research. It's very, very timely. I was wondering if you, in general, doing this research, looked into maybe nonprofits who kind of work in providing like menstrual products for people, and also just like general period education, because what I find is that they don't really provide necessarily sustainable or organic products, probably because they're sponsored by big companies like Always or other maybe locally brand products that are just kind of the normal disposable menstrual products. So and these organizations are important, and I think they're doing necessary work, but I feel like it's kind of just adding to the idea that there may be a little bit of normalizing the idea of, well, this is what's available and this is what we can afford to give you. And that just kind of pushes particularly people of lower incomes and maybe farther away from like urban sites that they can access sustainable products. So I was just wondering if you looked at all at like those kinds of nonprofits or organizations. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jessica, for your question. And actually, I think our next steps will touch on a few of the things that you mentioned. But yeah, for us, we do want to start talking about, and I'll backtrack by saying there's so many community-based organizations doing amazing work to provide period products. And I think Cleta and I, at least at CCMRH, we're thinking about ways that we can ensure that sustainable period products become part of that conversation, and that they become, available. And I think a lot of people are thinking about this as well. It's definitely not just us in Sustainabelle. A lot of organizations are talking about this too. We're currently doing a drive, and we are trying to figure out as well how we can provide sustainable period products through that, but also, continuing the conversation about usage. I mean, through our results, we found maybe a lot of people are thinking there's a learning curve. And so definitely, to your point, education is a big part of that. And I think as we think about next steps, that's something we want to pursue. And maybe I'll give some space to Chantal if you wanted to add anything there from the Sustainabelle perspective.
Yeah, just to add to the one issue, and some of the interviewees would have brought it up, is having the lack of access to clean water. So it's one thing that you want to give people menstrual cups and you want to give them reusable cloth pads, but if they're living in an environment where they don't have access to clean running water, then I mean, menstrual hygiene management is difficult already without having clean water, but now when you're using reusable products, it adds another layer of, difficulty. So it's um it's more complicated than just giving sustainable products. Apart from the education side of it, you have to make sure they have the necessary facilities to clean the products and maintain them. So it's a lot of work. So you have to, it's not just on the donation side, you have to make sure that they have the necessary facilities. So in Trinidad and Tobago, I know our water company, WASA, there are a lot of people that don't get clean water. Like I know where I live at the moment, it's tank water we're using all the time. So for people who have less regular supply of water, then how are they going to manage their period when, you have to wash this cloth pad or you have a menstrual cup? So it's a complicated discussion, but I think it's a good start to trying to donate more sustainable products. But there are disposable products as well. So it could be that we donate more organic, eco-friendly products rather than looking at the reusable side of it.
Thanks, Chantal. Kalita or Chelsea, did you want to add anything?
I think you all explained a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, awesome. And then there's a question from Samantha in the chat. Are you working on lobbying to the local governments for subsidies? I'm not sure if anyone specifically wanted to take that one.
No. So I mean, right now we're not working towards that. We are working on building up CCMRH, and we are working on doing different things like we're hoping to talk about in our next steps, but we do want to scale up this research to make sure that we have a foundation for if we potentially would want to lobby or have somebody take up on this research to be able to lobby. But right now we're working on building the foundation for that work, and then also just helping to provide products and provide what we can right now before we get into the advocacy space.
Thanks, Kalita. Another question that came up, and maybe I'll pass to Chantal if you're comfortable. This was through registration. Do you recommend the period cup? And if so, why? And maybe we can just talk a bit about it in general too.
If I recommend a menstrual cup in general?
Yes, and if so, why?
For me personally, because I never like to feel like you have a pad on or something. So a menstrual cup, I like to have an internal product. So I like a menstrual cup for that. And it is a learning curve because especially if you never used a tampon before, you might feel like, having to insert this thing inside of you. It's a bit daunting, but it's actually not that bad. Some of the folds you could fold it to make it um be as small as a tampon, and because it's really flexible, it's medical grade silicone, so you could kind of bend it up as much as you want. One thing with a menstrual cup, for me, I rather just change it in the shower rather than trying to navigate in a public toilet when you don't have like a tap in the stall with you, so it could be complicated. But yeah, I would recommend it if it's something that you would be interested in. It's actually not that hard to learn. It's not as daunting as it may seem. I would say you need to know your body because some people online, they would suggest, oh, when you turn over 30 or if you had a vaginal birth, you have to go up a size. But when I turned 30, I was like, okay, I'm going to magically need a large size. And yeah, it did not work out like that. So you need to know your body, and sometimes people might recommend certain things, but it may not work for you. So yeah, I would suggest try it. And we actually do have so I actually have one of her cups. You have Kiara Lucy Smith here, and she makes it's Harmony Eco. So they have menstrual cups in Trinidad and Tobago, and you could get it. It's pretty widely available. You could get it online. Because I think I originally got it in a pharmacy, but I believe you could order it online from her company as well.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. I actually just recently started using a menstrual cup, and I tend to have a heavy flow, so I like to use internal products as well. So something I worry about, because when I do wear tampons, I have to change them frequently. I actually found that I didn't have to change my menstrual cup in public space at all, because it could be left in for 12 hours and it still would not fill up or overflow. I wouldn't have any issues with that. So for me, that was a huge benefit, knowing that I could go about my day, do a full 12 hours of whatever that incorporates leaving my house, going to work, coming back home, and still not having to interact with it in a public restroom. So that was a major benefit for me. So I actually really love menstrual cups. I think they're such a great invention, and I actually wish that when I started menstruating, that was something that was available to me that I even knew about, because then, that would have just been, it would have taken away the learning curve, because there's a learning curve with any product, any menstrual product.
Thank you both so much for sharing. And in the chat, we're seeing a lot of people talk about how they love their menstrual cup too. So sounds like there's just generally some love for that product. Another question that we got at registration was, have you found with sustainable period products that there's new information and products being used to educate and inform choice? I think that kind of ties back to what we were saying. A lot of folks are saying more education and awareness is needed. And I think, spaces like these are a good place to start, where you can talk about your experience with a menstrual cup or, a menstrual disc or whatever you might use. And feel free to pop in the chat your thoughts on this question too. But certainly it seems like there's more education needed. And so we're glad to be having this conversation now. And another question that we got, and I know there are some folks that represent organizations here, was, are young girls in the Caribbean still using cloth pads? So anyone can jump in here, like Chantal, Cleta, Chelsea, or, organization reps if you wanted to jump in. But yeah, that was another question we got.
Yeah, I know with cloth pads, a lot of people think it's icky. They think it's something that older generations would use. So the idea of having to wash out your blood is a bit, they think it's gross. And I would admit, and I thought so as well, but until I bought some, I use it as like a backup. And sometimes I just don't want to wear a menstrual cup, so I would have cloth pads. And it's not that bad. It's good once you just, for me, I think it's easy once you just kind of wash it out one time instead of just dumping or use pad there. So it's easier once you deal with the blood one time. But yeah, I think with younger people, some of them, they just think that it's too much work, it's too tedious, and they don't want to deal with their blood. So I can't say how many of them are using it, but when I talk to people around my age, and even my mom, she was like, that's gross, no one wants to do that again, because that's what you did in the past. So I'm not sure how popular it is, but I know because we have a company in Trinidad and Tobago that sells cloth pads, and they seem to be doing really well. So clearly people are using it, but among the people I talk to, they just don't want to have to deal with washing out their blood.
Thanks, Chantal. And Jessica in the chat says there's a company here in Jamaica that sells period underwear. Don't know anyone who uses them in general though. Thank you. Did anyone else want to jump in? Does anyone have any thoughts? Like, are young people using cloth pads? Yeah.
I don't know about cloth pads. I do know that people are more open to the idea of period underwears. Like it's something that's being talked about more. I think more than cloth pads, we're seeing period underwears and menstrual cups and menstrual discs being advertised as sustainable options. I think, like Chantal said, there is still this taboo about cloth pads. I think because menstrual cups and menstrual discs and period underwear seem to be innovative new inventions, whereas our grandparents likely used cloth pads, and the innovation was to use disposable products where you wouldn't have to deal with washing out your blood and stuff like that. It's kind of seen as taboo, and like, why would we go back to using that? So I find that it's just like this miseducation, really, because then we're still more open. We're open to things like the period underwear that is essentially like a cloth pad, but it's just built in. Yeah, so I don't know that people are using cloth pads though.
But just to add, one of our interviewees, they did mention that they use cloth pads and they preferred it because the way their period was, a regular pad, they felt like they would waste it. So I think they felt like they got more use out of a cloth pad and it was easier to clean. So if you fold up a cloth pad and put it in your bag, it doesn't get as contaminated than if it's like a normal disposable synthetic pad. So they actually had preferred cloth pads because it was easier to clean and easier to maintain.
Thank you, Chantel and Chelsea, for sharing. So another question that we have, let me just pull it up, is how can we educate individuals about the benefits of using sustainable products? So we've talked, at a high level about the fact that we want more education and that's needed, but how can we actually go about, providing this education?
Personally, I think going into schools is really important. I remember when I was about maybe like 11, 12, you would have people come into schools and in primary school and secondary school talking about periods, and the options that they presented to us was literally just pads, normal disposable pads. So I think expanding on the type of products that are available to menstruators now, it's very important that there's a whole world beyond just disposable pads and even tampons. So going into schools and making sure that young menstruators are equipped with the knowledge and they could have the choice to decide on the product that they want instead of almost being forced. I felt like I was kind of forced to use pads because that was the only thing I knew until I was like a teenager, like 18, 19. So yeah, so definitely educating young menstruators about the different options, to me, is very important.
Hi, good evening. I would like to add to your presentation. My name is Faquita Watson-Jones. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Faquita Watson-Jones. I'm a medical doctor from Guyana, but I'm working in Montserrat. So I joined a bit late because of work, but I just want to add with the awareness of not just raising awareness to menstruators, but one of the key things is that we need to educate our boys about it, because I recently did a thesis on menstrual hygiene management and interventions for it in Uganda. It was a policy brief. And one of the things I found is that we fail to educate our boys and males, and that too applies within the Caribbean. Because being from Guyana and being part of an NGO called SRHR Adventures with Dr. Pat, which I will encourage everyone to join. I'll just put it in the chat. What we realize is that boys and males, they're not aware of menstruation, something that we know is very natural. They're not educated on it. And so it's important that while we educate menstruators, we should also encourage our males. And in that way, it prevents our menstruators from being shamed and having to face with other psychological consequences of menstruating. So I just want to add that. And I know just now you would have asked a question pertaining to disposable pads. I didn't get a question clearly, but from what I got is that you want to know who, if we have any knowledge of anyone who are using disposable pads. And I must say, I know of a few persons who use disposable pads. There's this organization within Guyana, Days for Girls. It's an international organization, but it also has a branch in Guyana where they make disposable pads. And in certain communities, you'll find that persons are more acceptable to disposable pads. Yes, globally, there are taboos surrounding disposable pads or menstruation on the whole, but I know of a few people who use it because, one, it lasts for at least a year. You just have to know how to clean it and care for it, despite the whole fact of having taboos surrounding menstruation. So that's just my piece I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faquita. That's great. And that policy brief you mentioned, is that available online anywhere?
No, it's not available online. I didn't get it to publish, but I recently presented it at a research day in Montserrat on YouTube. So you can find that on YouTube, and I can share the link here too so that persons can view it. And I'll be happy to share my thesis with your organization. Yeah.
That would be great. Yes. And I'm sure folks in the chat would love to see that recording. So if you don't mind popping in the chat, and we can email you as well about your thesis. But
Sure.
no, absolutely, I think this is something that we can talk about here too, like bringing, young boys into this conversation, I think is important. Although of course work shouldn't be just on menstruators to understand these options. Of course, boys should understand these things too. And before we pivot there, I just want to acknowledge that Crystal had left a comment in the chat. Saying just adding to the education side of it, there's not a lot of focus on educating the neurodivergent population. It would really benefit caregivers to learn about these different products, and absolutely agree. And I think that's something that, as we move forward in our next steps, we should consider in our work, because that's a very important point. I'm also seeing Yashi, sorry, before we move on, mention, she said, I'm not sure if this was discussed before I joined, but something Chantel said triggered a question about any effects of using disposable pads for extended periods of time. As in how she said she would have learned about pads at 11, only knew the other options at 18. So Chantel, did you want to comment on that before we pivot?
Yeah, so since the traditional synthetic pads, there are lots of dyes, fragrances, stuff that's not good for your body. Well, in general, you're supposed to change your pad every 4 or so hours. I find generally with a reusable pad, you could get a bit more use on it. So you could use it for slightly longer. Obviously, you still have to change and be clean and all that. But yeah, so a lot of interviews did mention why this switch, because traditional pads they're not really good for your body. It could be irritating. You have this kind of plastic feeling down there. You're sweating. So it could be an avenue for a lot of bacteria, for a lot of irritation. So yeah, so you really should not be. I mean, you need to change any period product as regularly as you say you should, but when you use the synthetic pads, it's generally not good for your body for all the dyes and synthetic stuff that they put in it. So even if you're changing it regularly, there's still the risk of bacteria and irritation. I just wanted to comment on what Fakita said. And yeah, I think it is very important educating boys as well. Like I was lucky enough to go an all-girls school, so I didn't have to deal with feeling ashamed if you had your period. But I do have 2 brothers, and there was always a kind of like you're not really talking about your period around them, and it's like you're being quiet. You feel like you're kind of sneaking around. So it is important. Now I'm more comfortable discussing it, but yeah, it is important, especially in the Caribbean, that everyone understands learn about periods and the different period products out there. So not just menstruators.
Thanks, Chantel. And Samantha left a similar comment in the chat. They said they're a social worker and they're aware that a lot of menstruators rely on their male partners or fathers for finances to purchase period products as well. So just agreeing that educating them is important. Did anyone have any other thoughts on, that topic or any other questions in general?
Yeah,
Hello,
so I wanted, oh,
Oh, sorry. Are,
you can go ahead.
are we allowed to ask a question here?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm Charmaine Howe from the Single Mothers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. I see you all are making everyone aware of when you start your period and during your period. Did you all touch on menopause and the ending off of period and the symptoms that women go through for premenopause and when it completely goes away? Because some education on that will be greatly appreciated as well. I didn't see it in the read up and stuff. What's your take on that?
That's not something specifically that we touched on, but we would like to include it in our education campaigns once we start doing those. That's very important to include. I don't know if any of our respondents, if you all know from our interviews, did any of them comment on that? I didn't have any respondents that commented. Yeah, so none of our respondents talked about that, but that's something definitely to include in the education component of understanding like period products and how it relates to menopause.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to the discussion before that. Yes, it's important for boys to also learn about menstruation. I remember, so I grew up in Jamaica, and I remember at about 11, 12, like Chantal was saying, you learn about your period and just puberty in general. Boys go into one classroom, girls going to another, and it's very hush hush what's talked about in the girls classroom, and you get a little pouch with a pad and this booklet, and you're supposed to put it in your backpack and hide and not talk about it. The thing is that these men grow into fathers who then have to deal with wives and daughters who are menstruating. And it's important that they're educated about it and understand what comes with menstruating, and also understanding what products are available, how it can help their daughters and partner to have better feminine hygiene, better health. And then I wanted to talk about the effect of pads. So most of the pads that we use are bleached with chlorine. That's what makes it all pretty and white. And that bleaching process leaves back this toxin called dioxin, and it's actually linked to a host of issues like uterine cancer, fertility issues, all these things. And so it's actually important for us, like beyond it being good for the environment, sustainable periods are better for our bodies in general, and safer. So that's like another motivating factor to switch to these products, especially as, I mean, fertility levels are dropping in general as women are deciding to have children later because, you know, we're career driven and the world is just changing. It's important for us to, if you're interested in having children, that is, because not every woman is, or every non-binary person is. But yeah, it's important for us to, you know, try to do everything that we can to maximize our chances of doing that if we want to.
Thank you, Chelsea, for sharing. Did anyone else have any other questions or want to jump in? Okay. If anything else comes up, feel free to drop it in the chat. I think now I'm going to pass it over to Kalita, and we're going to move on to our next steps.
So yeah, I mean, this has been a great discussion, but obviously there are so many opportunities to move forward with this research and the work that CCMRH and Sustainabelle are doing to improve accessibility and to sustainable and organic period products in the Caribbean. So, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about our next steps, and then maybe if you all have any questions or anything that your organizations or as individuals you are doing, it would be great to share as well. But so first, we wanted to obviously like scale up this research. So as we said, we only had like 100% participants and then 12 interviews. So we want to definitely partner with universities to scale up this research and have more robust quantitative and qualitative data. That's very important to us as well. We would love to map the vendor locations. So we've heard from our interviews and from a lot of you like where to get the sustainable period products and where they can be purchased, but we want to specifically map out the locations where they can be purchased within the Caribbean and identify areas where there are availability gaps so we can be able to expand the reach of sustainable period products. We also would love, as you all talked about, is talking about stigma. Continue to normalize the conversations on periods and period products throughout through events and communications. So we have had some CCMRH and Sustainabelle have partnered on some like Let's Talk periods where we just talk about periods and products and related conversations. But we want to hold more of these and do other more campaigns, events, and partner with throughout the Caribbean. We've had a lot of course, we have our reach is mostly in Trinidad, but we want to continue this work throughout the Caribbean and really reach uh, more countries. And then, as you all also talked about, is educating on sustainable period products. Just educating menstruators on the use and maintenance of sustainable period products, but as we talked about as well, not just educating menstruators, but people who don't menstruate on use and maintenance of sustainable period products is very important. So we want to continue that work. And then lastly, one of our another thing that we're hoping to do in the future is engaging local period product companies based in the Caribbean to design and supply sustainable period products. So, I mean, that is something that hopefully that will come in the future right now, but we want to focus specifically on the research is our main focus. But yeah, we have a lot of plans, but hopefully we will, with your help and with the help of other organizations who are interested in this work, we will be able to achieve all of our next steps. I didn't know if you all had any, if I didn't see the chat, but if there's any other work that you are thinking of doing, your organizations or as individuals are working towards, related to period products and sustainable, increasing the accessibility to sustainable period products in the Caribbean. If anyone has any comments, you can, I guess, share in the chat or unmute. That's okay too. Or if you have also any inputs on or suggestions for CCMRH and Sustainabelle on our next steps, that would be welcomed as well. No, well, I guess, are there any other questions that we want to add or questions that we want to ask to the audience?
I don't think we have any other questions. Oh, I see a comment in the chat, Cleta, if you wanted to.
Oh, I see. I see Jessica said, I'd love to work with training orgs in the Caribbean who do this work. It's not my primary focus, but it's definitely at an intersectional environmentalist perspective. It's definitely an area I'd be interested in focusing on. Yeah, definitely. We would love to engage and work with you. Yeah, we reach out to us and we will continue. Definitely follow us and or send out an email to CCMRH, and we love collaborating with organizations or individuals who are interested in furthering this work. So, and also connecting you with organizations that work in the space in your country. That's something that we do as well as part of CCMRH.
And then Jessica says workshops, webinars, and interviews as well, which I think definitely we want to continue to do and explore in the future too. Chelsea and Chantel, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Just that, so you have Yapsha, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So she was part of a study on period products in Trinidad and Tobago, like the accessibility, people being able to afford it. She shared the link to the study with me, so if you want, I could share it in the chat so everyone else could have a look at it. And I believe she'd like to share her organization's page as well.
That's great. Yapshal, did you want to share more about that research and what you all found? If you're comfortable, no pressure. Okay, we can definitely take a look at this link online. Thank you so much for sharing. Did anyone else have any other thoughts they wanted to share or anything? Feel free to pop it in the chat or unmute. And if not, I think we can pass over to Chelsea. We'll just wrap up.
Yeah, so thank you guys for coming. We definitely want to continue to have more conversations like this, like Aaliyah, Khalida, and Chantal have said. We will be in short order posting resources on our website about sustainable period products. Like Khalida said, we're working on mapping out vendors and locations and how to access them. And yeah, just recapping, we're looking to expand this research and find partnerships with universities and other organizations to scale up this research so that we can start to lobby and make period products, sustainable period products, more available in the Caribbean. I think that's all I have to say. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but just want to say thank you again for joining us this evening.
Yeah, I also want to add that we will be sharing the report that has like more details on all of our results with you all, everybody who joined today, and also we'll be posting it to our website so that you will all have access.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah.